Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and as requested, today we'll be exploring James DeMonaco's The Purge, starring Ethan Hawke and Lena Headey. Released in 2013 by Blumhouse Productions, The Purge introduced us to a dystopian reality where the American Constitution had been amended by a new ultra-nationalist political party known as the New Founding Fathers of America. This change to the law, dubbed The Purge, effectively allowed all crime, including murder, to be legal in the US for 12 hours each year. The aforementioned law, which permitted all crime to take place in the evening of March 21st for 12 hours from 7 PM to 7 AM the next morning, only had a handful of rules. That government officials ranking 10 or higher were off limits, the use of weaponry above Class 4 was forbidden, and that police and emergency services would be suspended during that time. Should any of those rules be ignored, a citizen would be subject to execution by the state. While the NFFA advertised the purge as a means by which citizens could vent their anger in a way that also took care of the unemployment rate and reduced crime for the rest of the year, over the course of the films we'd come to discover that the program was explicitly devised to enable the government to legally eliminate undesirables, including minority groups, the homeless, and the poor across the country through direct and indirect means. It's important to consider that despite their claim to serve the people, the oppressive and hypocritical party existed only to serve their own agenda. They promised to create a utopia free of crime and unrest, but its foundations are built on the very thing they vowed to eradicate, a truth that would lead to their inevitable undoing. Upon first glance, the idea that such rules would be enacted in a representative democracy like America sounds ludicrous, and I guess this is true to an extent, but we only have to look back on humanity's past and even our present to see that institutional repression from totalitarian regimes is a sad reality. When it comes to The Purge and the New Founding Fathers of America, James DeMonaco uses the dystopian concept to explore several themes. These include America's relationship to guns and violence, notions of class warfare, consumerism, neoliberalism, and the public's view on catastrophic societal events.
Citizens growing angry as they face a collapsing economy.
A new party is arising as a substitute to the Republicans and Democrats, calling themselves the New Founding Fathers of America.
The first film in the series is an interesting one. Unlike its sequels, where we see the effects of the purge through the eyes of the vulnerable that were being targeted by the regime, the story unfolds through the perspective of the wealthy Sandin family, who, under normal circumstances, should never be adversely affected by the purge. Though the Sandins, like most Americans, are complicit in mass genocide through their inaction, their refusal to actively partake in the annual event is the first sign we get indicating that although they accepted the purge, they didn't necessarily agree with it. This inaction was both a window into their psyche, as well as a hint to the possibility that other citizens might also be resistant to the NFFA and their ideology, something that's expanded in the follow-up films, which paint a more comprehensive picture of how the rest of the country felt about the purge and the political party that instigated the constitutional amendment.
The purge is not about containing crime to one night and cleansing our souls by releasing aggression. It's about one thing: money.
In order for us to understand the film, we have to go back to the future, with the recently released prequel film, The First Purge. In it, we discover that in the wake of a horrendous financial crash that caused unemployment and crime to soar across the US, an extremist ultra-nationalist faction known as the New Founding Fathers of America had taken control of the government in 2014. Answering the public call for change, the group soon began a social experiment on Staten Island under the guidance of a behavioral scientist, where all crime would be legal for 12 hours. With many citizens planning on leaving the island before the commencement of the experiment, the NFFA offered the locals a payment of $5,000 to stay on the island and even more to actively participate. Contrary to the plans of the NFFA, instead of chaotic scenes of violence in the streets, the majority of citizens choose to host block parties and mass celebrations, with only minor incidents of theft and murder. This ironically created a utopia of sorts, with crime at a minimum and unemployment at 0%, given that everybody on the island would be getting paid a lump sum of money, indicating that all that would be necessary to create peace and prosperity would be for the government to join the Yang Gang and provide a universal basic income for all. With the experiment failing to reach the goals of the political party and now threatening to cripple the NFFA, the government released hired mercenaries to initiate mass genocide, creating a cascading effect in which people started descending into the chaos the political party hoped to achieve. In addition to wiping out the homeless and unemployed, the deaths also ensured the NFFA wouldn't have to pay most people that agreed to participate in the experiment, as they would have died during the purge, creating a win-win scenario. While the experiment was hailed a success and orchestrated by the NFFA to mislead the public, paving the way for a compulsory national purge, pockets of resistance began to spring up across the country that denounced the purge as an un-American abomination. This dissent in turn inspired vigilante groups that fought to protect the innocent and led to politicians mustering up the courage to call for an end to the barbaric ceremony once and for all. I think it's important to note that the citizens didn't commit the majority of murders that were carried out during the Purge, with most of the death toll coming from the government-sponsored death squads used to misrepresent the efficacy of the Purge program.
You're sending soldiers into the island disguised as gangs as citizens, hunting people down using the tracking implants. You're making it look like people are participating because there wasn't enough purging.
Set in 2022, 8 years after the NFFA had taken control of the government, and 5 years after the social experiments on Staten Island, the Purge gave us our first look at the event through the eyes of the upper middle-class Sandin family, with James, an executive working for a security company, his wife Mary, their well-meaning but somehow still creepy son Charlie, and their rebellious daughter Zoe. At the start of the film, we're informed by the state-run media that as a direct result of the Purge, the US had been saved from economic ruin, unemployment had plummeted to below 1%, and crime had become almost non-existent. This may all be true, but the means through which this artificial prosperity is achieved is completely overlooked. Unemployment decreases simply because the unemployed were being slaughtered. The economy recovers, but at the cost of public services being privatized, creating a vacuum of monopolistic markets.
Wait, hold it, wait a minute. Why are you raising my rates now? Do you know what today is?
But more worryingly, while crime becomes non-existent for the rest of the year, the scale of violence during the Purge becomes increasingly grotesque. This also has a dark and disturbing effect on the psychological makeup of society and its citizens, who, under normal circumstances, hold back their baser instincts in favor of law and morality, and are now forced to spend an entire year dreaming of ways to be bad for 12 hours. Though we do get a one-sided assessment of the Purge through the state-run media, we also hear people on the radio sharing their thoughts and concerns over the event, with many arguing it was a political mechanism for population control to reduce public reliance on welfare programs and public health insurance. While the Sandins now lived in a beautiful home within an affluent gated community, they had actually been struggling to pay the rent only 10 years prior. With the introduction of the Purge and the skyrocketing demand for advanced security systems that came with it, James's business became extremely profitable, pushing the Sandins out of poverty. This ties into the themes of consumerism and neoliberalism embedded in the ideology of the NFFA, which redefines citizens as consumers whose democratic choices are best exercised by buying and selling, a process which rewards merit and punishes inefficiency. It's for this reason that the political party feels justified to wipe out the disadvantaged citizens that were unable to participate in this process. Though the Purge was a horrendous event that plunged the country into chaos for 12 hours, the Sandins were relatively unfazed by the national mini-holiday, due mainly to the fact that they weren't personally affected by it. Hiding in their extravagant home behind cutting-edge security technology designed by James's company, to the Sandins, the Purge is a distant ceremony, seen only through news reports and cameras that gave them a view of everything happening outside.
Things like this are not supposed to happen in our neighborhood.
Well, they are happening, James. They're happening right now. Do you see this?
This inherently creates a disconnect from the reality of how awful the Purge is, but it also classifies the Sandins as consumers, which are the best type of citizens in the eyes of the NFFA. It's not until their son Charlie allows a wounded war veteran into their home, putting them in the direct path of the young nihilistic gang that was hunting him, that the Sandins go from being passive observers of neoliberalism to active protesters. Around the same time that their home is being surrounded by dangerous yuppies pursuing the stranger, Zoe's boyfriend Henry, who'd snuck into the house, emerges in her room and professes his love for her. The young man then explains that he wanted to convince her father to allow the young lovers to date, but when Henry walks down the stairs to confront him, he fires a number of shots at James, forcing him to retaliate and mortally wound him. When the Sandins are then given an ultimatum to find the stranger within their home and hand him over to the gang, or face the wrath of the murderous group, James initially chooses to hunt him down and turn him over to save his family. But once the man is caught, the Sandins begin realizing that handing him over was the same as putting a knife to his throat, revealing their true feelings about the Purge for the first time. This revelation ultimately leads to the family collectively deciding to reject the proposal, and the very idea of the Purge itself by standing their ground and defending themselves from the home invaders instead. The Sandins manage to take out a number of gang members, but James is eventually stabbed in the stomach with a hunting knife and mortally wounded by the leader of the group, known as the Polite Stranger. Their neighbors then suddenly arrive and begin wiping out the gang members, seemingly assisting the Sandins in their time of need. But once they reach the family, the neighbors reveal that they wanted to kill the family themselves. The reasoning behind their neighbors' actions is initially put to us as being driven by jealousy, with the Sandins having one of the most beautiful houses in the gated community. But the truth of the matter had more to do with class than anything else. As mentioned earlier, James reveals that their family was actually poor until the Purge law had been enacted, after which James's company began making a fortune by selling security systems to the wealthy, including their affluent neighbors. In their eyes, because the Sandins built their empire by exploiting the elite, to them they were still poor people that were masquerading as wealthy, hence their desire to wipe them out. Luckily for the Sandins, their charitable act of not handing the wounded stranger over to the gang pays off when he appears and disarms the neighbors moments before they were able to purge. Despite the fact that James had died in the chaos and that their neighbors had wanted to kill them, Mary orders the entire group to sit in the kitchen and wait until the purge was over. This difficult decision was not only a matter of morality for the Sandins and a way to honor James, who died protecting his family after deciding to help the stranger, but was also a defiant act of civil disobedience by Mary and the first step towards a cultural revolution. When the sirens begin to ring, indicating that the purge was now over, the intransigent Mary orders her indignant neighbors to leave, before asking the stranger if he was okay and finally thanking him as he departed, leaving the Sandins to look on at the carnage that had befallen their family. Just a side note, the stranger, known as Dante in the sequel, would not only star in the follow-up film as a freedom fighter, but would also go on to be the only character featured throughout the original trilogy. I really enjoyed this movie, and the themes suggested to us throughout the entire series. While perhaps not as elegant as George Orwell's 1984, which highlighted the dangers of totalitarianism and the repressive regimentation of all people within a society, Demonico's film does a great job at covering the same ground within a more familiar setting. My only gripes with this series were that the stories lacked any creativity beyond the concept of the Purge. I mean, here we have a scenario whereby any and all crime is legal, but the citizens and their government only seem to be concerned with murder. Personally, if I were in a Purge scenario, I would arm myself and my family and ensure that we were holed up somewhere safe, but I'd probably also take advantage of the Purge to improve my family's situation, from organizing a heist and robbing a bank to simply incorrectly filing my taxes. I'm of course curious to hear what you guys thought about the movie and what you guys might do to survive during a purge, so please share these in the comments below. A huge thanks to all of you guys who requested we explore The Purge. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content, and if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Nihat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Your home tells me you're good folk, just like us. One of the haves.
And your blue flowers tell me that you support the Purge.
And we want to treat you fairly, so listen closely. We've gotten gussied up in our most terrifying guises. As we do every year. Ready to violate, annihilate, and cleanse our souls. Mr. and Mrs. The man you're sheltering is nothing but a dirty homeless pig. A grotesque menace to our just society who had the audacity to fight back. You have until our provisions arrive, provisions which will help us break into your elegant home. If you don't deliver him by the aforementioned time, we'll release the beast on him and on you.